Welcome to Victoria Rumble Room, an island show that likes to peel the onion on issues that are local, provincial, national, even international. And there are stories that people tend to be talking about around the water cooler. And speaking of cooler, there's nothing cooler than my co-host with the most, Cool Hand Luke of Saanich, John Jurisic.
Love your names. Love your nicknames. Oh my gosh. Hey, thanks, Rockin' Robin. I was able to get one in there. You're always so innovative. I just love it. Thank you. It's so cool. Anyway, there's nothing cool about the street issues in our community. Downtown sidewalks are littered with tents, garbage, and desperate people. Some of this has drifted into city parks. Lots of talk, but Robin, no real solutions yet.
And we keep thinking we've had solutions and we still see the same problems. I was walking in Beacon Hill Park the other day and I saw a tent again. I thought the tents in Beacon Hill Park were a thing of the past, and it's still an ongoing issue. The summer weather is receding. The cooler nights are now moving forward, but it is not pushing the homeless population out of their tents back into social housing. There is a lot of social housing that people are choosing to stay in tents and on the street. Our street problems remain. Vancouver to Nanaimo to Victoria. And as you say, John, no clear solutions in sight. We've had blue ribbon panels gathering to sort things out, but the public is certainly getting restless.
As they are, Robin, I've seen all kinds of video and audio on Twitter reflecting some of the chaos that goes on at night at these parks that are just beside high density housing. It's a problem so many folks are reflecting on, and a lot of committees are forming to discuss. You and I are discussing right now, but you know what? No real solutions are being found for the drug addiction, mental illness, and at times, many times, criminal behavior we're seeing daily on our streets. Certainly, our viewers are taking note of this. Jerry writes us, tough love is needed now. We have to institutionalize these people so we can sort out who's the drug addict and who's the drug dealer.
There's a lot of frustration, as we've said, and we've also on this program, on the Rumble Room, a number of times said that we believe the homeless need to be clearly assessed, and it needs to happen now in a clean, safe, secure environment. If they're homeless and they're unemployed, you get them shelter. You get them into jobs programs. That's fairly straightforward. If they have mental barriers that are causing them problems, get them treatment now in, again, a safe, secure environment. If they're addicted to narcotics, well, deal with that. And then if they also have outstanding mental barriers, deal with that as well. But again, in a safe, secure environment. And if people are breaking the law, well, they should go to jail. And if it's not a severe thing they're getting charged with, they should go into a secure environment and deal with whatever is taking them to the mean streets of our community. And this isn't brain surgery. This has been talked about for a long time, but unfortunately, all of this, everything I've just talked about, is expensive. And that's why it's not happening. I think that is the reason that government talks a big game, but doesn't deliver. And I wish they would, John.
Robin, you and I are sharing a frustration on our show. Meanwhile, hundreds, if not more, residents who live near city parks are going out of their minds, as we are, with frustration, as tents and bad behavior have continued to ravage neighborhoods. A case in point is Stadacona Park. Victoria Council has positive plans for its future, but in the short term, the tents remain. Short term eventually becoming 2 years, Robin.
Yeah, it's an ongoing issue. It just doesn't seem to get better. We put this all to a councillor friend of ours, Chris Coleman from Victoria, asking why the tents in Stadacona Park in particular have not been removed.
Well, I think it's a matter of time frame. So we have agreed to close down a certain number of parks, including Stadacona, to camping as of, if I remember properly, the date now is November 1st. And it's putting the squeeze on other orders of government, frankly, where we say this is not appropriate use. Parks should be for everybody, and you were forced by legal action to say camping is allowed dusk to dawn, basically, and that's why we have crews that go around to many of the different areas where there are people in tents and get them to take it down at 7 in the morning, but then they repopulate for the next day. For Stadacona specifically, that should be ending by November 1st, and it's putting the squeeze. We have now identified 5 parks only that have toilet facilities that would allow this, but it's squeezing it down. The other alternative would be to say we're not going to close any of the parks until homelessness is solved. And that's not workable either.
But weren't you elected by taxpayers?
Yes, of course we were.
Aren't Victoria taxpayers supposed to be your first priority rather than solving wider issues that really are the responsibility of the province and the federal government?
That's exactly why we have said that we are going to squeeze the process, and we are closing down Stadacona as of November 1st. It was suggested earlier that it could be September 1st, but that wasn't what Council chose to do. So we're putting the process in play, and we still have, I went out not that long ago with, I think, 12 folks from bylaw and police and parks and public works doing the morning walk along, where we went and said, okay, take your stuff down. If it's soiled, we'll take it away, we'll throw it away. It goes to Heartland Road, which is a sad issue as well, but that's a sideways issue. But these people, they are citizens of the country. We need to deal with, I think, 85 to 90% of them who are there but for the grace of God go I. And there's another group that camouflages itself really well, that are involved in the criminal element, who we need to enforce against. And it's a process that takes time. We're changing, but it takes time. And I understand the frustration of the people who live adjacent to it. It's hell for them.
Do you really understand it, though? I mean, it just seems to me that the public is really outraged about this. The things I see on social media, what I've heard advocates talking about, it's like the city has a bit of a deaf ear. Like, we're going to bend over backwards for people who may not even be from Victoria at the expense of people who pay taxes towards this city.
Some are from Victoria, some are not from Victoria.
Well, that's the rationalization that's used all the time.
Last time I checked the homelessness count, 84% of the homeless population was from the southern part of Vancouver Island, 89% was from Vancouver Island, 11% were from away. I don't know if that's changed, because that's a dated fact. But that was
a while ago that was done.
Yeah, it may be, but it's still largely a homegrown issue. Is there in-migration? Absolutely. We know that. All the stats point to that. But we can't just flip a button and make it change today. Sad, but true. So we're trying to get a process that squeezes it down, and as I say, for Stadacona, I certainly hope that November 1st is the end of that.
Meantime, BC Premier David Eby is promising more money for social housing through First Nations, nonprofits, municipalities, other organizations. He's also talking about a $700 million surplus in their next budget. All of this sounds very promising, but unfortunately, there is a looming shadow overhead.
You know, John, that looming shadow is debt, public debt. Yes, we have an operating budget now for the province, is going to have a surplus in it of $700 million. It all looks good on the surface, but, you know, governments for a long time have been very good at sliding around the numbers to make things look better than they actually are. There may not be government in the operating debt, but there's plenty of debt in our crown corporations and agencies and other organizations that are still government responsibilities. And that debt, that same debt, is growing right across the country. We discuss this on a regular basis, and it's getting to be a situation where our viewers are getting concerned, and we are hearing from our viewers on a regular basis. Mark writes us, we literally are being taxed to death. These elected morons are so far out of touch and reality, but continue to hammer us down. He also says, why is this province the most expensive place in North America to live? And Mark goes on to say, the announced multi-million-dollar surplus is just another kick in the face, and this bloody housing shortage is never addressed.
Well, we did address the housing shortage on the Rumble Room last week when we spoke to Casey Edge, from the Victoria Residential Builders Association, and also Keith Dagg, who is supporting the Bayview Roundhouse project in downtown Victoria. So our debate over density and housing continues unabated. And as for taxes, standing by is the BC director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Carson Binda is here. Let's zoom him in.
Now joining us in the Victoria Rumble Room for the first time is the BC rep for the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, Carson Binda, and so great to have you on the show.
Thanks so much, Robin. It's a pleasure to be here.
And we've got lots to ask you about. I want to talk, first of all, about the debt clock. And I would like to mention, rolling into that, I'm really pleased to see it back somehow. We haven't really been talking about debt very much in this country for quite some time. I think it may have something to do with the pandemic and the feeling a lot of money had to be spent to keep the economy rolling, but it seems the money just gets spent and people don't talk about that. Do you agree the public has somehow lost interest, and why should they get interested in it now?
Yeah, so the big thing is that these numbers in recent years have just gotten so huge, it's really hard for people to really conceptualize them. So federally, we're sitting at about 1.2 trillion with a T dollars of debt. That's $1.10 million worth of debt. That's a huge, just mind-boggling number that people have a really hard time wrapping their heads around. Provincially, we're sitting at about $98 billion worth of debt. Again, just an astronomically huge number. So I think as these debt figures have continued to grow and grow so quickly, people are just having a hard time conceptualizing what that means for them and how it impacts their day-to-day.
How does it impact their day-to-day?
Yeah, so the $3.3 billion of interest payments that here in BC we're spending on debt this year alone, that's less money that we have at home for tax breaks, which people desperately need right now. It's less money that we have to build hospitals and schools and roads in BC. So as those interest payments are going to keep on taking a bigger chunk of the provincial budget every single year moving forward, we're going to have less goods, we're going to have less services from our provincial government, and there's going to be less opportunities for government to make people's lives easier through those tax breaks.
Carson, welcome to the show. First time,
Thanks,
outstanding. I'd like to chat about a subject near and dear to my heart, appears to every heart in Canada. That is this affordable housing scenario. Lack of affordable housing scenario. Okay. Some context first. Canada, we have more personal debt than any other country in the G7. Number two, variable interest rate mortgages are killing young families with houses. Okay. They are doubling the mortgage rates in some instances. They're having to sell. All right. There's a whole crisis going on with a generation of families trying to get into the housing market. Number three, young Trudeau, after 8 years of government, has decided that they are not responsible for literally the number one issue in Canada, the lack of affordable housing. Fourth, seems like Conservative Party might be considering some solutions to these things. Oh my God, how unique. Pierre Poilievre came up with some ideas around requiring cities to approve massive apartments next to federally funded transit stations. Whether you like this or not, thank you. There's a solution. Okay. So please, where does the Canadian Taxpayer Federation and what do you guys have to say about the exploding costs of homes? And can government help? Or should they be out of this?
Yeah, so to start off with, we've seen the price of housing here in Canada double since Mr. Trudeau first took office. That's a huge increased cost for families, for individuals, for folks looking to move to Canada. It's unsustainable for housing prices to keep on doubling every 8 years, which is the trajectory we're on right now. We need government to reduce that red tape, reduce those taxes and those burdens on builders, so they can actually start swinging hammers. I mean, I like to say you build houses by swinging hammers, not hiking taxes. But that's exactly what we've seen from just about every level of government here in BC and across Canada. I can give you a great example. The carbon tax hits home builders hard. The trucks that haul lumber to the lumber yards, they're hit with a carbon tax on the diesel they need to fill up. The lumber dryers, lots of which are powered by natural gas, they're hit with carbon taxes when they're trying to dry and process that lumber. And then the tradespeople who haul the lumber to the building yard in the back of their F-150s, they're hit with carbon taxes yet again. So a big reason why house prices have just been exploding through the country lately is because of government taxes, bureaucracy, red tape that all add to the cost of building a residential housing unit anywhere in Canada. I'm sitting in downtown Vancouver right now, which is the epicenter nationally of the housing crisis. It's the least affordable municipality to build new housing or to find housing in the country. And I can tell you, after speaking with tradespeople, after speaking with developers, after speaking with people on the government side of things, the big issue here in Vancouver is the red tape, the permitting process. The permitting process takes longer than it does to actually build the house, just getting the permission to build it here in Vancouver. So government-imposed costs are the real reason why our housing system is in free fall right now. Once you remove the red tape and remove the taxes that make it so expensive to build housing, we'll have cheaper housing across the country.
The other side of that, though, and there is, of course, always different angles on these things, is that I believe it is up to almost 30% of the cost of building a home now is various taxes, and various governments are reaching in for their share. Now, municipalities, I believe, only get 8% of the overall taxation pie. And municipalities also have very few areas that they can actually generate revenue besides taxing people on their property. So one of the areas that they can get money is in construction. So they do. That's one of the reasons they have this bureaucracy. And they also have all these different taxes. It's a way for municipalities to wrest money from the public, which they then use for policing and for all the problems that we're having in our downtown. The policing situation is out of hand. We have all these street people on the streets. We have tent cities. We have addicts. We have the mentally ill. They used to be housed in federal and provincial facilities. That's all been closed. It's fallen on the municipalities. So now they're having to carry the load. So I'm interested to hear on all these fronts, but I guess I'd be interested to hear specifically what the Taxpayers Federation think about the federal and provincial governments getting more serious about, again, taking responsibility for people that are on the streets, both the catch and release of prisoners, but also facilities needed for addicts and for the mentally ill, which were closed years ago.
Yeah, so politically, this has been a football, the housing crisis. It's being passed between the feds, the provinces, the municipalities, and nobody wants to take actual responsibility for what we're seeing on our streets, which is a human tragedy right now. So we need to see politicians getting more serious about owning up to their failed policies, which have led to the explosions in homelessness, the public safety crisis in our streets, the lack of affordable housing. We need to see them stop passing that buck between the three levels of government and start actually owning up for it. And the issue isn't that government isn't collecting enough revenue to solve these problems. The issue is how they're prioritizing how they spend it. So here in BC, we ended the last fiscal year with about a $3.6 billion surplus, according to the most recent numbers from the provincial government. And David Eby sent that all straight out the door. He gave $500 million to TransLink, the transit authority here in the Lower Mainland. He gave $500 million to BC Ferries. And I think as anyone who traveled on BC Ferries over the long weekend will know, that didn't go very far to fixing the systemic issues they have. So the real issue is how government is prioritizing the money that they're spending. The government has decided that, especially federally, Mr. Trudeau has decided that housing isn't something he prioritizes as Prime Minister. Public safety isn't something he's prioritizing as Prime Minister. So we need the federal government, and we also need Mr. Eby over in Victoria to start looking at these issues, taking responsibility for them, and stopping passing the buck back to the municipalities and saying, hey, this isn't our job, it's your job.
Carson, as a first-time guest on the Victoria Rumble Room, it's worth noting that, in fact, over a couple of years, we've had over 1.25 million views, cumulative views. So clearly people listen and they interact and they comment. A common thread amongst all of this, which is becoming increasingly frustrated, is there's no solutions. There are problems that are not being solved. And so let me go to yet another one to sort of piggyback the housing one. Victoria and Vancouver drivers pay more at the gas pump than anywhere else in North America.
Yes.
While they drive to their extraordinarily expensive homes. At the same time, Ottawa keeps talking about slowing down our oil and gas sector to move us into green energy. That's very noble, fabulous. Climate boiling is upon us. Not sure if anyone actually did the economic equation on how to get there. Nonetheless, from a taxation perspective, we're getting hammered with the gas tax, okay? And it gets more and more expensive to drive. How's it come to this? And what do you guys think about all this?
Well, it's important to point out first and foremost that all these taxes we pay at the pump, that's a tax plan. It's not an environmental plan. We know from the Parliamentary Budget Officer's recent report on the second carbon tax that Canada's own emissions are not big enough to materially impact climate change. We produce about 1, maybe 2% of global greenhouse gas emissions. This is a global issue. So taxing Canadian drivers through the teeth isn't going to be a solution to that global issue, especially when you've got big emitters like Russia, like China, like Brazil, that aren't doing any of this, are burning more and more solid fuels, things like coal, every single year. So taxing Canadian drivers, taxing British Columbian drivers is not a solution to global climate change, which you're right, is a huge problem. And you're right again, pointing out that Vancouver and Victoria are the two jurisdictions in Canada that face the highest taxes at the pump. 64-liter fill-up in Victoria will set you back about $45 in taxes alone. In Vancouver, that's all the way up to about $50 in taxes alone. And at a time when we know that food banks across this province are seeing unprecedented, record-breaking demand, when we know that about 1 in 5 Canadians are skipping meals to save money, it's totally irresponsible for this provincial government and these municipalities to be taxing drivers more than the cost of a chicken dinner with all the fixings for a family of 4 just on a tank of gas.
You know, when the pandemic hit our world, and it seems like that was so long ago, but it wasn't, there was comfort in government reaching out with CERB programs to keep money in pockets and keep people employed. In that case, massive government spending kept us out of massive unemployment and soup kitchens. But what's happening now is government is propping up the economy with this debt and keeping employment up by hiring more civil servants, Robin. Come on, build up the private sector, please. We can't run our economy on public spending. It's not sustainable.
And our friend David Schneider, who's been a guest on this show on a couple of occasions, passed on the latest year-to-year stats from the Fraser Institute on employment. Nationally, the number of government sector jobs increased 11.8%, while private sector jobs increased only 3.3%. But if you think that's disappointing, take a look at what is being said about the BC employment figures. BC has the fastest rate of government sector job growth at 22.6%. Also, the slowest rate of private sector job growth. It's down at 0.3%, John.
Pathetic. Sorry, Robin, that's not good enough. Well, we can't keep shutting our doors on industry like fishing, like forestry, like energy, like technology, and expect our economy to remain strong and sustainable. We'll certainly be doing more on this topic in the future. Unfortunately, now it's time to wrap things up.
It really is, John, but we want to again thank the 1.3 million people that are tuning in or have tuned into the Rumble Room over the last 2 years. So much appreciate the input and support, the letters we get. They're not all flattering, but they're all interesting, and we really appreciate getting feedback from the viewers that we have and doing our bit for the community. And I want to reiterate, we don't do this as a money-making venture. This is a voluntary thing that John and I have taken on because we believe in our community, and it's a small way we can put something back, hopefully from discussion, feedback, and exchange. And so we really appreciate getting your feedback. Keep doing it. And with that happening, John, maybe again could tell people how they can tune into the Rumble Room.
Absolutely. Certainly the Rumble Room is a labor of love, and I certainly enjoy doing it with you. Thank you. We're on a bunch of places, okay? Our flagship is, of course, our Facebook page. We're on, I can't say X. Come on. We have a Twitter page that's very active, very active. And, of course, it's now X. We're on YouTube. That's where all of our videos live. We're heavily engaged in Facebook news groups, lots of chatter in those little parts of the web, as well as Instagram and TikTok. So again, from my Saanich lair, I remain your Croatian sensation, Johnny Jurisic.
And you are sensational, John. I'm Robin Adair, and rumble on.